Pankaj Goyal back together with Meena Martin, VP of Cyber Risk and Assurance, GSK, to talk about third-party management.
Good morning. Back again. So we have a very important topic to talk about, which is third-party risk management. Pierre just reflected on it. And it's almost like we are in the middle of a crisis on third-party risk right now. So these are the incidents which have happened just over the last 3 weeks. If you have followed the press here, you had the incident in Bank of America where one of the third-party system integrators got breached and Bank of America faced a breach. You had an incident with Change Healthcare where Nick was talking about it, that the entire healthcare insurance, the pharmacy industry in the US is facing challenges and it has not been resolved yet. There was a data loss through third party on American Express. And these are all the incidents over the last 3 weeks only, right? And I fundamentally believe that we are in the middle of this crisis and we need to, as an industry, as an ecosystem, we need to rethink third-party risk. And after this session, if I can convince even one of you that we need to do things in a different way, that will be success for me. So one of the leaders that I have come across over the last year who is really rethinking third-party risk is Meena. So I'm very glad to invite Meena to talk about third-party risk, how she's building it out in GSK.
Thank you, Pankaj. Hi, everybody. My name is Meena Martin. I'm the VP of Cyber Risk and Assurance, working for GSK. For people who don't know what GSK is, it's one of the largest pharmaceutical companies. We operate in about 76 countries in the world. So this is a good segue, to what we were discussing last topic. So a third-party risk. So why is it even important? So why do we even care about third-party risk? So Pankaj, I'm going to ask you that question. Why is it even important?
One single data point that half of the attacks last year, data point that half of the cyber attacks last year could be traced back to third parties, not first party. So I think and that number is increasing. So it's just an increasingly important threat vector.
So I'm really passionate about this third-party risk. Just to put that into perspective, within my organization, we've got 60,000 third parties. And that's 60, not 16, 60. That's just third parties, right? Then if you take into account the fourth, fifth, sixth, and nth parties, that is countless. What does it mean for us? So now, all of a sudden, we have like millions of third parties, fourth parties, and fifth parties operating either within our infrastructure or outside our infrastructure, which means the attack surface is huge. And which means that there are a lot of backdoors that's been created as well. So we not only have to take care of our organization, but also we have to care about third parties, fourth parties, and so on and so forth. So that is a big, big issue. And that's why we have to do something about it. We really have to partner with each other to actually tackle this problem. And so, to be honest, I actually found it very difficult to identify something which is really working. So that's why you can only see like 2 points there. So, and that's my best effort, honestly. So now, what is not working? At least for my organization, what's not working? When I start managing the third-party risk, maybe 10, 12 years ago, it used to be a spreadsheet-based. It hasn't come a long way at all. I mean, still the same thing, but maybe we're using a system to manage the questionnaire. But at the end of the day, the methodology is still the same, right? We're still using manual, questionnaire-based, point-in-time assessments to send a lengthy questionnaire to the third parties. We don't know who is receiving it. So you probably get the best answer depending on who gets that questionnaire. And then it's heavily time-consuming as well. For us, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. And we really cannot afford that because, in the pharmaceutical company in where we are operating, we have to be really agile. And this is certainly not helping us. So then what then? I mean, a lot of companies that came into the market claiming that, we can actually do a non-intrusive scan, which is external in, and we can give you a really good security posture on the third parties. Now, that is only giving false assurance. I'll tell you why, because we can't rely on that. Firstly, there are a lot of noise, there are a lot of false positives on that. And secondly, if I take, like I said, there are 60,000 third parties in our environment. Microsoft is probably the number one with the highest risk. Can we believe that? And that's only because they're offering hosting services. There are other companies hosting inside Microsoft infrastructure, right? And that's probably why obviously it's sending a lot of alerts. So it is not reliable. For me, if I can't trust it, I cannot go to the board and say, hey, these are the top 5, top 10 third parties operating in GSK infrastructure. So again, that's giving false assurance, which we cannot trust. And so holistically, we've got a bigger problem to solve. So what's working? Over the period of time, I've seen that the vendor relationships have improved. It still has to go a long way because it's a partnership. I wouldn't even call it as a relationship because providers like us, we have to trust the vendors have to trust us. That is not happening because we always see as a one-way, like GSK, we take a big stick and then say to the organizations, yeah, hey, you got to answer these questions, you got to do this, you got to do that. It has to be a partnership, and so we have to build that partnership as community. It still hasn't happened yet, and that's why we want to change it. We want to reset the whole way how we think this third-party risk management. So what is the next-gen third-party? We know about next-gen firewall, next-gen EDR, next-gen whatever. So for me, the next-gen third-party is really, it has to be data-driven. It has to be scientific. It has to be data-driven. It has to be agile. It cannot take like weeks and weeks to get something, and it has to be continuous as well. If we can solve all of this, then we can actually trust the data. We can trust, and then we can actually do in a continuous fashion. So what is GSK doing to actually solve this problem? One, before I explain what we are doing, there are two types of third parties that are in our organization. One, the third parties that are within our environment, meaning that they provide the infrastructure services, or they actually provide developers to develop applications, or actually, they provide people, as contractors to help to come and work for us. So that's one type where we really don't need to worry about their external posture because they're within our environment. So what we do care about is actually how they operate within our infrastructure. The second type of third parties that operate are actually outside our infrastructure, but they have access to our data. And I'll give you some examples. These are organizations that conduct clinical trials for us. So they are outside our infrastructure, but then we collaborate data with them, which means that they have access to our data. So again, even in this scenario, we don't really need to worry about this organization's external posture entirely, right? Because what we do care about is what type of data they have access to. So we really have to map the end-to-end data from start to finish. What I mean by that is from GSK infrastructure, how is it traveling to this third party? From this third party, how is it traveling to the fourth party, fifth party, or whatever it might be, and how is it coming back to us? So that is core. And secondly, how do they manage access? It can be within the environment or it can be outside. But for that data, how are these third parties managing access rights? So those are the two things that we really care about. The other things are secondary because we don't really need to focus a lot. And this has to be risk-based, right? Because, the other things also contribute, but we don't have to focus a lot. And primarily, we are focused on data and access. So we have come out with this name. It's called CyREX. It's a supplier risk index. So what we are doing is we're actually taking three perspectives. One is actually the engagement type, who you are. So what type of third party you are? Are you providing infrastructure services to us? Or are you providing clinical trials? Or are you actually just providing people to us? Or are you providing pencils and pens? So really the engagement type is what determines, one of the factors that determine the risk. The second one is actually the access. So how are they, what kind of access they have within or outside our environment? And what kind of connectivity they have? Are they coming via VDI? Are they actually having GSK-owned laptops, or are they using some other technology to access GSK data? So that is access and connectivity. The third perspective is very, very important for us is the behavior. So how are they exhibiting the behavior? So For instance, are they people who constantly click on phishing links? Are they people who click on phishing simulation as well as phishing? So are they kind of contractors who have a lot of incidents triggered by our DLP? So all of this, right? So if you put that into perspective, you have engagement type, who you are, access, how are you coming into our infrastructure, what kind of access you have. Third one is the behavior. How are you actually exhibiting the patterns within our environment? So those three things are absolutely critical for us. There are other factors as well, like incidents on the third parties. So generally, what kind of incidents they have, which we can get it from external sources, threat intelligence, and also mergers and acquisitions. Sometimes when you merge with a company, you might inherit the risk. So, but those are contributing factors. But for us, the primary factors are really, the engagement type, access, and the behavior. I'll actually explain to you in a minute how. Sorry. Yeah, so if you look on the left-hand side, and those are the different types of data points that we have collected so far. And obviously, the more data points you have, the more powerful it's going to be. So some of the data points we've collected are the contractor management system, and the access systems we have, the DLP, the data loss prevention, and also some of the behavior points like, how many times we've clicked on the real phishing with our email gateway. And then we actually conduct phishing simulations every quarter. So how have they performed on the phishing simulations? So all of that. So we've got about 15 different data points for third parties. And obviously, we're expanding a lot. The more you expand, the more data points you have, the more powerful this whole tool is going to be. And so once you collect that, and these are the three different types, what I just mentioned, the engagement type, the access, and also the behavior. So we've got different perspectives, and we have graphs showing how each perspective is showing up. So when we go to the board or somebody else, we can say, hey, from an engagement perspective, these are high risk. But if you take from a behavior perspective, these third parties are okay, but these third parties are the ones that's exhibiting the high risk. So we want to have a mix of everything, right? Not just from one perspective. And now, how do we calculate the risk? And so this is very interesting. We took a lot of time to think about it. And now, firstly, it has to be explainable. Like, I should be able to explain to you how we are calculating the risk. And it has to be simple. It shouldn't be very complicated. And it has to be repeatable. Because when we invent something or when we do something, it has to be repeatable. It has to be consistent. More importantly, it has to be science-based, right? It can't be based on interpretation of Meena. It can't be based on interpretation of Pankaj. So how do we do all of that? So we looked at different methodologies. We looked at different frameworks. The one we have selected for now, again, it's for now, we want to expand on this, is this ISO 27005. So what it does is it works on 0 to 5, a scale of 0 to 5 pointer, and it's based on CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So that's the pointer that you take, and it's based on the CIA principles. Now with that, what we started doing is we looked at the impact. So impact is something which doesn't change frequently. For instance, access rights, role, position. Like I'm the VP of Cyber Risk and Assurance. Does it change frequently? It could change, but then not frequently. So impact is really based on the factors that don't change frequently, whereas the likelihood is actually based on factors that do change frequently, things like the phishing clicks. Somebody might be clicking 4 times a year, but that could change. Things like the other behavior patterns, like how many incidents they've triggered on the data loss, so how many exceptions that they've triggered and things like that. So likelihood is really based on the factors that actually change frequently, and then the impact is based on the factors that don't change frequently. But all of this is measured using the 0.5, which I've just mentioned here, on a scale of 0.5 with the CIA principles, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So just to put that into perspective, like I said, the impact doesn't change frequently. To give you some examples, the impact would be higher if we have a contractor with incidents that have the highest administrative privileges, as opposed to somebody having just read-only access, right? So the impact would be higher if there is a contractor or a vendor that have the highest privileges within the environment. So likewise, the likelihood will be higher if you have a contractor or a vendor who is exhibiting consistently risky behavior. Things like, for instance, somebody might be clicking on a phishing email 4 times a year, as opposed to someone clicking once in 3 years. So the likelihood is higher when you have contractors or vendors that exhibit the risky behavior. And so that's how we map it. And this is just to give you an example. So there are 2 things we do. One is we compare with contractors. So for instance, we compare at the user level. So how are the contractors compared with the peer groups? How are the contractors compared with peer groups with incidents? So that gives you 2 perspectives, right? One, how is Meena compared to her peer groups? Am I high risk or low risk? So if you look at it, am I at the highest risk quadrant or the lowest risk quadrant? That's one perspective. Now, if you know that, then how is Meena compared to the rest of her peer groups who are generating incidents, who are generating events, who are generating issues? So that gives another perspective to look at. So okay, now Meena is a high risk already. Now if you look at when compared to her peers with incidents, events, and issues, and she is actually of more risk. So that's how we actually score. And this is the same principle that we do at a contractor level, at a user level, or also at the vendor level. Because if you look at the contractor level, we compare with the rest of the contractors, we compare with the rest of the peer groups. The reason why we do at the vendor level is because sometimes, there could be a group of contractors, who just don't take things seriously. In which case, you just have to remove them from the account. You don't have to remove the vendor from the account. There could be scenarios where the vendor is not playing the ball. So in which case, you really have to have a firm discussion with procurement, and the business unit take some action on the vendor, not on the contractors. So this is a reason why we are looking from a contractor perspective, which is an individual perspective compared with the peer groups with incidents, events, as well as from a vendor perspective, like how are the vendor compared with the peer groups? Then how are the vendors compared with the peer groups with incidents, events, and issues? So that really, that holistic view is really helping us to drive some data-driven decisions. And I believe that, this can actually, we have multiple plans in the future, but for now, this is a start. We haven't finished yet. This is the start of the journey. And just to give some examples here, and this really, what it does to us is really 2 things. One, it really helps us to be proactive. Because with all these data points, with all this analysis and all of that, before something happens, we can have some meaningful conversation with the vendor, or we can have some meaningful conversation with the contractor, and we can even remove some contractors from the account if they are too risky. So that's on the proactive side. On the reactive side, it's extremely helpful. Actually, it has helped in multiple situations for us. So for instance, when there is a third-party incident, so immediately, we can actually discontinue the access. We can actually take some action on the third parties or on the vendor. So it is extremely, it's very, very quick. So like 3 years ago, we had an incident with one of the strategic partners we have, and it took like 6 months for us to even react. But now it's just a matter of seconds because, we know all this, we've got all the data points, we know how they're connecting, we know what kind of access they have, we know what kind of behavior they're exhibiting. It's just a matter of seconds, right? We can actually go and do something as long as we have the agreement with the business to do so. So all of this are really, really helping us to move forward in the right direction. But again, one thing I re-insist is that we really have to create the partnership between the vendor population and the providers. Because I don't think that still exists, because there's still this kind of a Chinese wall between you're a vendor and I'm a provider. We need to break that, and the only way to break that is work as a community. So we really have to have these conversations, we really have to sit down with them and understand their problems. I'm talking about my problems. Now, the vendors equally, they will have their own problems as well. So we really need to understand that. I think that for that, we in GSK, we are planning to have a CISO summit where, we're trying to invite the top 50 or 60 high-risk vendors, high risk from this perspective, and really have meaningful discussion to understand what they really need. What do we need? How do we work collectively as partners as opposed to provider versus vendor? So these are some of the themes we have. Again, it's very early days for us, but I just wanted to share this with you so you get an idea of what we are trying to do. The next step, obviously, Pankaj will talk about it, is really, how do we do this? How do we quantify this? So yes, we've got all the data points. We really, we're super excited about this. Now, if you want to go to the board, right, how do we really quantify that? So what is loss magnitude? We haven't done that. And really that we want to do with FAIR methodology, and we want to partner with SAFE and actually take this to the next level. So maybe Pankaj, you can explain on how we do that.
Thank you, Meena.
Yeah.
This is, I can just stand here. So this is phenomenal, and I think this is almost like the first practical implementation of FAIR TAM. So FAIR third-party analysis module, this is an approach for looking at third-party risk in a new way. And as I said, we need a reset. And this is like 3 simple principles. First is risk-based prioritization, which Meena talked a lot about. Second is comprehensive continuous monitoring. And this has 2 C's, comprehensive and continuous. And then third is actionable mitigation. So how can you actually take actions? It's not just informational, it is not just FII. So let me just double click on this very quickly. First, risk-based prioritization. So many companies today, they are prioritizing their vendors based on contract value, size of the vendor, etc. What we are saying, what FAIR is saying, is that prioritization has to be based on the risk assessment. What risk that vendor is posing to you as a first party. And the risk can be analyzed using FAIR MAM based on data access, network access, revenue access, right? It's as simple as that. Then you have comprehensive and continuous monitoring of security controls. So as I'm very passionate about this, that just outside in, just one-time manual questionnaires, they are not enough for you to assess risk, either for you or for your third parties. So we need to move to new ways of collecting data. And what Meena showed is that you can collect data on a real-time basis from your environment. So for example, GSK runs phishing simulations on its contractors. So you can get that telemetry. GSK knows how contractors are connecting to their VPN. And so GSK can get that data. So there is a lot of data that you have in your security environment, in your IT environment. And then, of course, for super critical vendors, you need to build a partnership with them to get data from them also on how they are managing their risk posture. And that is not submitting SOC 2 or not submitting NIST. It is beyond that. And then you can quantify that using FAIR CAM. But the important thing is continuous and comprehensive security controls. And finally, mitigations. This is, I think, this is like a famous quote from Doug Hubbard. He told me, you have more data than what you think always. And I've just paraphrased it. You have more control than what you think. So one of the common complaints of CISOs and risk practitioners is, oh, these are third parties, I don't control their security posture, what can I do about it? And so I'll just do the basic compliance stuff. But you actually can do more. There are a lot of controls that you control yourself. And you can also call it zero trust third-party risk management, where you are understanding what are the controls that your contractors, your third parties are working against. You need active collaboration and an open dialogue and sharing of data. So that is one of my goals and objectives for this year as FAIR Institute is, how can we engage the broader ecosystem where there can be sharing of more data across among the vendors on security posture, especially as this risk is becoming so critical going forward. So I would just conclude that hopefully we were able to convince at least one or more of you that we need a new approach. And thank you, Meena, for sharing what her team is driving. This is phenomenal. And we'll talk more about FAIR TAM. There is a third-party research working group in FAIR, and which we have launched in January. So I invite your participation and contributions to this important piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you.